It's season 6, y'all.
What's up?
Oh, I should have just played the sound effect. Oh my God.
I forget we have a soundboard now.
You know, that I don't use. Apparently, I don't ever use.
Oh, we'll push it now.
It's too late. The music is going.
Oh, okay.
Welcome to season 6. And as Ashley has mentioned, we're well past 200 episodes, and oh my God, and how many thousands of downloads?
60,891 downloads from the time we started doing our own thing, not part of the radio station.
That is amazing. Thank you, guys. I guess we should introduce ourselves. Welcome, guys, to another amazing week of Case Files with Kat
And Ashley.
And
Nora.
Yay!
Nora is visiting us from France. And she's never heard of our podcast. So I try to warn her that this is an awful story, but she's choosing to sit in here. How are you liking Texas so far?
Oh, I like it very much. People are so friendly.
That's because we say, bless your heart. We are friendly in general. We are. Okay. So we had a 2-week break.
Yes.
How was it for you?
It flew by, honestly.
Did you miss me terribly?
Oh, always. I feel like it's been 2 years.
I only see you like twice a week.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I had couches the last time we did a story, but I have couches now.
No, you did? Oh, okay.
Yes, I have couches. Yay.
Anything else?
Well,
No.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just excited to have furniture because I haven't had it since the house flooded. So.
And that's been, y'all remember
like 2
when
years.
I know, remember when that happened? Oh my gosh, that was awful.
Yes.
Well, so everyone who's been a longtime listener will know that horrible story. So here we are. Okay, so I have a big story, and Ashley has to go home and cook dinner. Yes. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Hold on, I need to take a break. Mm-hmm. That's probably the last drink I'm going to have all night. Okay, so I'm going to say this. Ashley told me about this author.
Oh.
So thank her or blame her at the end of all of this, because this is...
I don't know who we are talking about right now.
But when I began doing research, the man's name is James Mitchell Mike, for short, DeBardeleben.
I told you about this. Okay. I mean, I'll take the credit, but I do not remember this.
So when I first began doing research on Mike DeBardeleben, I didn't know who I was learning about. I honestly had never heard about him before. But the author is Stephen G. Michon.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying that was the name of the...
Did I say it right?
Yes, that sounds very French.
Michau.
Mm-hmm.
Michon. Boom.
Michon. Yeah.
Nailed it.
It's very brave of you to do French things right now.
That's it. And that's where the French ends, everybody. That's it. So he was part of the Ted Bundy tapes. Yeah. Like he was the journalist, the author.
I'm with you
there.
now. I was thinking the first name you said was the author, and I was like, who was
Not
that?
Mike DeBardeleben.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So he was one of the guys. So if you've seen it, it's on Netflix, the Ted Bundy tapes. He was part of that. He was the one in the room getting those tapes made. And then the documentary, he was in that. So, but once I started listening to it, I was like, what the fuck am I listening to? Like, it was immediately like, I didn't know, like, how did I not know about this guy? But let me say this. So his story, Mike's story, Mike DeBardeleben, right off the bat seemed like so much more significant than Ted Bundy.
Oh.
Like that. Yeah. I mean, like that's like dropping a bomb.
Yeah.
Right. And I had never heard of him.
Yeah, I've never heard of him either.
And so I wonder if we're alone in this, because he is the number of crimes, the largeness of his crimes, like the variety of his crimes he is put into a league of his own. He's not, like he talks down about Ted Bundy.
Oh, wow.
He's like, Ted Bundy's an idiot, you know, like,
Yeah.
he is just, he's so much smarter. And there's a, there is like a truly evil that's in him. So the title of the episode is "The Cruelty Was the Point."
Oh, wow.
The cruelty was the point. And so this is about Mark. Here,
Get pre-ready.
let's get like, oh, I turned it down. I turned it down. Sorry. Here you go.
Yes, Kevin.
There you go. Sorry, Kevin. All right. So, and I want to say this now, and there will be some very disturbing scenes and descriptions about rape, kidnapping, sexual abuse. So, please be advised that there are trigger warnings for sure, and just listen carefully.
And speaking of disturbing, I just noticed that Kevin has no ears anymore.
Nope. Thank my kids.
He's earless. Poor guy.
Thank you for coming to her TED Talk.
Okay. Poor Kevin.
Kevin still can yell though.
Nice.
All right. Okay, so let's just start at the beginning of this man's life. His name is kind of fun to say, though. DeBardeleben.
That's his actual name?
Yeah, Mike DeBardeleben. Yeah. Interesting, right? Lots of E's and B's and D's. DeBardeleben. Okay, so he was born on March 20th, 1940 in Little Rock, Arkansas. He was the second of three children born to James Mitchell DeBardeleben Sr., I'll just call him Senior from now on, and Mary Lou DeBardeleben. So they were a military family. They moved a lot. He served. She was the stay-home wife. And after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Senior took a commission as a lieutenant in the U.S. Army and was posted in Washington, D.C. for the duration of World War II. Mike's younger brother, Ralph, later became a U.S. Army paratrooper. In 1945, the family moved to Austin, Texas, and James Sr. was shipped out to the South Pacific for 9 months. Part of the reason they moved was because Senior started to have an affair. And wifey found out about it, and that became a big source of contention. And so they moved to Austin to start a new life. Then in 1949, the family moved briefly to Kentucky before relocating to Frankfurt, Germany. And in 1950, James Sr. was promoted to lieutenant colonel, and the family moved to The Hague in the Netherlands, where he served for 2 years as a military advisor for the U.S. Embassy. And then in 1953, James Sr. retired from the Army and took a federal civil service post in Albany, New York. So they were really moving everywhere. Those of you who have been Army brats, I guess, is like the kids of people who served, or those who have served and have moved around a lot. I've moved around a lot. We've had that discussion 37 times in my 46 years. Moving is hard. Moving over and over and over again, that's really, really hard. And you can just, like, as a person who has experienced that amount of moving in my life, like, I get how, you're starting a new school, and then you don't speak the language. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Going to The Hague and you don't speak Dutch. What are, like...
Yeah, or Germany.
Or Germany, right. So obviously the marriage between the DeBardelebens was unstable and chaotic, and they both ended up having affairs. At one point, his parents had considered divorce because of all of the infidelity, but ultimately he said that basically only the real mother can love the children as much as they deserve to be loved. Mm-hmm. It was kind of the thing, like, who better to love the children than their real mother? I'm like, well, who's to say you would have the kids? I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, so he said that for the children's sake, they should stay together. But that's a terrible reason.
Yeah.
Because it's not good. But bad move, because she was already reeling from all of the moves, the depression, the loneliness, and one of her children was becoming less and less controllable, right? Her middle son. So unsurprisingly, DeBardeleben's mom was a sexually promiscuous and emotionally unstable alcoholic. And she could be violent. She was actually very violent. He was the kid who experienced her violence the most. His sister actually said, like, yeah, mom would hold his head under cold water in the bathtub to cool him down. And I just like that the panic of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the fear of that. This is before kindergarten.
Yeah.
So she was witnessing that. She was like, God, mom, like he just pushed mom's buttons, I guess. And like, it was just bad. So she got, he was a troublemaker, but they also told him he was a troublemaker. He was very opinionated. He had a lot of, he just was kind of his own person, and they just expected him to be bad. And they would tell him, you're just bad and you're going to be bad. There's nothing that you're going to do that's going to be like, so you're just going to, as a kid, you're going to be like, well, okay, well, if I'm going to be bad, I might as well be bad.
Yeah.
So he actually, so his mother often neglected the children when her husband was away, because he was away a lot. So she would go to the bars drinking. She would pick up men. Sometimes the kids would go. Mike's sister, Linda, became a caretaker for her younger brothers. And during this period, DeBardeleben developed a hatred for his mother. Hatred. And then it became just a hatred of women in general. It just developed. So it started with his mother, and then it just kind of became all-encompassing, all women. But I think ultimately it was always still like, how am I going to get my mother back?
Yeah.
Like, what can I do to these women to really get her back?
Yeah.
So DeBardeleben was abused and neglected by both his mother and father. That's obvious. But his father was a punitive man and was very critical of his children and never praised them for their accomplishments. So if they were good, it would just be like, it's expected. If they were bad, boy, did they hear about it. So when he was younger, his father would punish him by just switching him and, just all that kind of stuff. And these were always happened before he was even old enough to be in school. So even from an early age, DeBardeleben was a loner, detached from other children altogether. And then according to his own account and that of his sister, he preferred to be solitary. He liked drawing and sketching in his room. But this is during a time that, like, if you wanted to be an artist, that wasn't like super like encouraged.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how are you going to make any money being an artist? I don't know. People probably think that now. But he did love to draw. And so they were kind of pushing him to do other things. That this was like his way of his own inner satisfaction. So he really began to exhibit antisocial behavior and aggressiveness towards others in his adolescence.
Not just women, just everybody. Right?
Everybody. He was now antisocial. You're a teenager. It's already bad as a teenager. Nora, you're a teacher. Antisocial behavior is kind of part of the thing. She's a high school teacher.
Oh my God.
So you're...
Wow.
Right? And so if you're shy, you're shy. If you're antisocial, like... Teenagers are tough. And then here's somebody who is smarter than most and isolated. And that's just kind of like a weird combination. In 1956, at the age of 16, DeBardeleben physically assaulted his mother for the first time. And he alleged to have sometimes threatened his mother with a hatchet
God.
or a letter opener. On September 8th. Oh, and he called her Mo. Mo.
Okay.
Yep. Not Mary Lou, not Mom. Mo. Just seemed, I feel like that was just like a big fuck you for like no reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay. So on September 8th of that year, so 1956, he purchased 2 handguns and ammunition with a friend. He was 16. Then later that month, he was arrested and convicted of his first felony, possessing a concealed firearm. And this arrest was the first of many to follow, including sodomy, attempted murder, kidnapping, and many other charges. So we're off to a great start. So many of you will know the sexual crimes expert, Roy Hazelwood.
Yeah, I think we've talked about him a couple of times,
Oh,
haven't we?
he's gotten brought up a lot.
Yeah.
He's very important in, I guess, the true crime, American true crime, I guess all over. He's the man behind Criminal Minds. That's what it's based on. And well, Hazelwood calls DeBardeleben, quote, the best documented sexual sadist since the Marquis de Sade. Did I say that right?
Marquis de Sade, yes.
Sure. She said it better. She said it better. So if you don't know who that is, he was a French nobleman whose perverse sexual preferences and erotic writings gave rise to the term sadism. He also went to jail for those things. Like it wasn't like he just was like penning beautiful poetry about sadism. It was, like he raped girls and went to jail for that. One of his pieces was named Justine, I believe I don't know how you pronounce it in French, but it's spelled like that. Anyway, how would you say it?
Justine?
Justine,
yes.
She says it so much better.
I know. She should just do the story.
I lied about that being the only French. And then now we're done with the French. All right. So in the spring of 1957, DeBardeleben's high school career ended with his expulsion. He was 17. He got expelled from Peter Schuyler High School. And then in October of that year, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. And he was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. But after a year, he was court-martialed. Not surprising.
Yeah.
All of these people who don't want to be in prison, but then they join the military. It's kind of like,
yeah,
it doesn't work. It doesn't work for you. So he was court-martialed for disorderly behavior, and he was sentenced to 2 months in the base stockade. And then in 1958, he was ordered to see a psychiatrist for counseling after he was pronounced AWOL several times. Several times. I didn't think you could do it more than once.
Yeah.
So then at the age of 18, he was discharged from the Air Force and moved in with relatives in Fort Worth, Texas. Yeehaw. You have a question?
No.
Okay. And then in 1959, DeBardeleben attempted high school again. Didn't work. He enrolled in R.L. Pascal High School, but after 3 months, he was expelled again. And then in August of that year, he married his first wife, Linda Weir. But 3 weeks later, he separated from her. Also that month, he was arrested for attempted robbery with an accomplice, followed 2 weeks later by his involvement in a string of auto thefts, and was sentenced to 5 years probation. In October, he fathered a premature stillborn daughter with an unidentified woman. That kind of gets sprinkled throughout. Okay, so DeBardeleben later met Charlotte Weber, who was 17 when he started dating her. At the time, DeBardeleben lived at home with his parents, terrorizing his family. Terrorizing. So he doesn't.
I'm just impressed that he has convinced women to date him. It's just like he hated them.
I've really thought a lot about that. He wasn't a bad-looking guy.
I just feel like it'd be so hard to hide that much hatred and psychoticness. But I guess if he was better than Ted Bundy, like not better, but like smarter. I talk about his IQ is later, but
I think that it's that narcissism. I think it's that borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
It's that they're so charming. They know how to manipulate people.
Yeah.
And so it is not a surprise that most of the women who marry him are still teenagers.
There's how many are we talking about? Like a lot?
I mean, more.
Wow.
There's more. Less than, I'm not going to say, no, I'm not going to be mean. But more anyway.
Okay.
But they're young and they're impressionable and they're isolated. They might come from a small town. They might, just not have a lot of worldly experience, might have really conservative parents. And so he picks his mark, and none of them are by accident.
Yeah.
And so it's like really like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So he was living at home with his parents, terrorizing them, as I said. In fact, they feared that he was going to kill them. Like that was a true blue fear. They would have experienced a violent outburst in which he, I'm just checking the thing, violent outburst in which he lit fires in his room.
Okay. All right.
That'll show them, and then kicked doors in. Nonetheless, Weber described DeBardeleben as a handsome young rebel with whom she was enthralled. That's a quote. Was she into the bad boy image? Maybe. We've all been there. I'm just saying. But man, she saw those red flags and thought they were like honing beacons. And she went right for them because it was like, everybody was like, no. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm a kid. Oh yeah, that's exactly who I want. So in March 1960, he got Charlotte pregnant and they got married of that same year in June. And then on December 12th, 1960, he fathered a daughter, Bethine. Then Charlotte described him as preoccupied with vanity and being cold and detached, but not abusive. Later wives described how DeBardeleben tortured and abused them. So DeBardeleben fathered a second child with Charlotte, but was forced by her parents to give up the child for adoption. She had left him and she was living with her parents. And so when she got pregnant again, because he kind of tricked her and he ended up in the house, and then they had sex one time and she ended up pregnant. And then there you are. So she gave up the baby for adoption. And then on August 12th of 1961, his 19-year-old brother, Ralph, the one that became a paratrooper, he was on leave from the Army, but he was staying in a motel due to an argument with his brother. He committed suicide in a church parking lot. And what he'd done is gone to the church and somehow fixed a hose from the church or in his car. Like, I don't know what he did, but he was able to asphyxiate himself.
Because of this argument?
So who knows what was said? He had stated to his sister that he intended not to return when his leave was up. So he was probably already suffering from depression. It kind of sounds like that.
Yeah.
But DeBardeleben later blamed his brother's suicide on severe depression arising from rigorous paratrooper training. A girlfriend who rejected him. This is like the first incel. This is like the first incel.
But not anything he did, of course.
Oh, no. No, narcissists don't accept blame. And then as the underlying cause, the same deprived home environment that he claimed created him. So it's her fault that I'm like this, is basically what he's saying. So DeBardeleben attended 2 different universities in Texas in the summer of 1961. He didn't have a high school diploma. How did he do that? I don't know. He didn't stay in school anyway. He went. So he soon divorced Charlotte, but his probation was revoked the following year, and then he was back behind bars. He probably broke it somehow. So DeBardeleben moved back in with his parents after being released, and he immediately started violently beating his mother, who he called Mo, and his health started deteriorating at this point, and he started acting more aggressively. He was reading a variety of psychological books as a diversion, and he was brought to a Western State Hospital in Staunton, Virginia. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. Staunton, Virginia, for psychological assessment in March of 1964, after his parents alerted the authorities. Finally, they say something out of the concern that he could kill them, because he was going to kill them.
Yes.
So he was later labeled as sociopathic and antisocial. Basically, you can't medicate this person, and being in jail is the best option.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, this is, and that's the thing. Like when I was reading about Shelley from, the crazy mom from Washington State, I talked to my friend Paul, who's a psychiatrist, and he was like, "Oh, that's the kind of person we would not take in. You can't medicate.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do for that person, and you can't tell that person they're sick.
Yeah.
So they need to go to jail." Clinicians opined that his antisocial personality would render him a poor candidate for psychotherapy, and that the safest place for him would be a jail. So DeBardeleben began seeing Wanda Faye Davis after that.
Naturally
met somebody else who was 6 years younger than him at this point. And soon after they met, the two eventually were married in September of 1964.
This is wife 3, right?
This is 3. So she is 18.
I gotta look this guy up.
She is 18 at this point. While you're looking him up, there's not a whole lot about him.
Well, I was going to look at his picture.
There's like 3 photos. I actually found some on Reddit that I'm going to send to you, but it's like of him younger. And I'm like, oh, that's what he was handsome. Yeah. There was like, he's cute. Kind of. Except when he does this. There's one lineup photo like that. Later, she would describe him. So she went by Faye. So Faye would describe him as well-groomed, charming, and intelligent, 100%. Ultimately, he got Davis to agree to have naked pictures taken of her, and then it increased. So it's not just like, oh, let me take some sexy boudoir. Oh, another French word. Say it.
Boudoir.
Yeah. That word. It's not just those pictures. It's now we're going to do sex acts, and then we're going to do sadistic sex acts. And now he's broken her down. And then later he would use these pictures to threaten her to helping him commit various crimes as his accomplice. She became his ride or die. Like, I'm going to send this to your parents if you don't do what I tell you to do. So she did. Unwillingly, but she did it. He disclosed his grotesque sexual fantasies and openly discussed his urges to torture and kill women to her. Poor Faye. I told you this wasn't a good story. But she did later tell the Secret Service, quote, his greatest thing that he could have ever thought about was to abduct a woman, torture her, have various sex activities go on, strangle her, and watch her die, or blow her brains out with a gun.
I'm almost surprised this woman survived. But go on, sorry.
Then he would hide her so that if she were ever found, there would be no evidence of who had done it, and it would be the perfect crime. The man thought of nothing else. He talked about crimes. He thought about them. He wrote about them. He planned them out. Like his brain was always on crimes. He was just criming all the time. So then DeBardeleben was arrested in 1966 for kidnapping and sodomizing a young girl. So this is 2 years after that wedding. A crime he committed with Faye's first cousin, male cousin. Yay! So this was his first known sex offense. But after the jury discovered that the victim had gotten into the car with the two men voluntarily, the charges were ultimately withdrawn, which just...
So wait, Faye's cousin was a willing participant. Mm-hmm. Okay. I was thinking you were saying he was the victim, but he was a participant.
Yep.
Okay.
So he was like, hey, cousin, you want to come rape this chick with me? And he was like, yeah. And so he got his cousin, this cousin that was bigger, to will this girl to get into the car. I mean, sure, willingly? I don't know. So 2 times within a short period of time, Faye got pregnant with DeBardeleben's child. The first pregnancy ended with a miscarriage. After when he found out that she was pregnant, he shoved her down a flight of stairs and killed the baby. And then they were already divorced when she gave birth to his daughter, Lindsay. So now we have Bethine, the adopted daughter, and Lindsay. When he met Karen, his 4th wife, she was 12 years his junior. She was a high school student and 17 years old. Gross. When Secret Service agents searched DeBardeleben's home after his first arrest for counterfeiting in 1976, they discovered a printing press as well as a collection of dildos, whips, vibrators, and a stack of 5x7 cards containing the names, addresses, measurements, and physical characteristics of numerous women. His house had amateur sadomasochistic pornography all over the walls. The evidence found led to him being convicted and sentenced in a federal penitentiary in Danbury, Connecticut, where his intelligence was determined to be his IQ to be approximately 127. It's really high.
Yeah.
I bet Ted Bundy's wasn't that high. I don't know. I'd be interested. Now I got to find out. Look it up. So during his imprisonment, DeBardeleben wrote, quote, "I feel that I have been unjustly tormented, degraded, and shit upon by society, specifically the American justice system, which is rotten to the core. In order to regain an adequate self-image, I feel compelled to somehow restore my self-respect. If I were to shit upon society for inadequate monetary gain, commensurate with the pain I suffered, and not get caught, it would accomplish my objective." Okay, so you're going to wreak havoc on society in general until you feel that you've been repaid. I mean, when is that ever going to end?
According to this list, Ted Bundy had an IQ of 136. Jeffrey Dahmer was 145.
Wow.
Ed Kemper was 145. I was just looking to see of people that we've talked about.
Oh, yeah.
This is listing the...
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't the smartest, but boy, did he evade everybody a lot longer. Okay, so in 1978, after spending time at a halfway house, DeBardeleben moved to Arlington, Virginia, where he purchased a 1977 Ford Thunderbird to resume his criminal activity. The man had to be criming all the time. Always be criming, ABC. At the same time, a misunderstanding at the Crime Information Center led authorities to conclude that he had actually died. He was dead. Oh, God. Oops. So that helped him a great deal. I don't know that they ever figured out how it happened, but oops. But right now, like, this is just me speaking here. This is me, not my research. Isn't all of what I said already enough?
Yeah.
Like, isn't it enough that he should be in jail? Like,
Yes.
there should be no more. My story should end, honestly. Like,
You are talking about the American justice system.
I am talking about it.
I mean,
Anyway, God. All right. But as I mentioned earlier, the man's IQ, pretty high, and he evaded capture for years and years and for so many crimes. Ted Bundy, he was on the run for less than 5 years, just under 5 years. This guy was on the run for decades.
wow.
Because of when his crime started and when he actually it just well over a decade, probably closing in on 2 decades. Okay. From 1979 to 1983, the United States Secret Service believed that they had found a geographical pattern to a string of counterfeiting cases and were tracking the distribution of counterfeit $20 bills across 44 states. $20 bills across 44 states doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's a big deal because the Secret Service started receiving allegations of bogus $20 bills being circulated in the eastern United States in 1979 from bank tellers and store owners. And all the notes had the same flaws, suggesting that they all came from the same source. So he was an artist. When I told you earlier he was an artist. These were beautiful looking bills. The printing, he even had the printing with, if you looked at our American dollars, it has like red and blue fibers.
Yeah.
Cotton fibers in the bill. In that linen bill. And so he actually would print those little fibers, randomly placed. And then he spent a lot of time aging the bills. So you'd have these really worn bills. And so he would go into a store. And he would say, okay, I just need this magazine that's $2.25. He would hand them a 20, and then he would get the $18.75, and then he would do it to another store. So he was just raking in the money. So authorities kind of guessed that based on all of his spending, that he was making $130,000 a year.
Oh my God.
And this was in 1979. Making $130 a year just off of those cash register transactions.
Yeah.
He never bought something that was $100. He never spent more than that 20. And then he would take those like little dollars from the cashier from the store. So it was really brilliant. He never went over. It didn't seem sketchy. It was always, whatever. So authorities began distributing sketches to store clerks in 1982 as they started to get a little bit more suspicious about that. This is really just one guy. And they were saying, if someone hands you this 20 and this is what he looks like, they were told to call the police. So this led to DeBardeleben's arrest at a Maryville, Tennessee mall. So in his car, when they arrested him, the guy that recognized him was like, "Oh, I've seen him before," and because he got made before, like he got caught having that done to him. And so when the guy came back in, he was like, okay. So he gave the guy the change. He gave Mike DeBardeleben the change and then called Secret Service. So Secret Service shows up and they block off and he knows that he's made. So he tries to run and they catch him and they get into his car and they found more counterfeit 20s. They found DeBardeleben's driver's license that read Roger Blanchard, but the car he had left the mall in was registered to a James Jones. So they had to use his fingerprints to identify him. So from the fingerprints, that went everywhere. So that actually went to different offices. And are there any other crimes that were committed? Obviously, 44 states, like this was all over the country. So they go to his house and he lived in this like little studio apartment, like a bachelor studio apartment. There was like, you're just looking at this one room, basically. They flipped it. They did all this stuff. They didn't find it. But these Secret Service agents who were so committed to bringing this guy down, they were like, man, this is like the ultimate counterfeiter. Like, this is why the Secret Service was even created. The United States Secret Service was created to combat counterfeit criminals. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, that's I never. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that was their original purpose.
So right after the Civil War, there was a lot of counterfeiting done by Confederate soldiers or the Confederacy to kind of, get one over on the Union, I guess. I don't know. But there was a lot that was happening, and
it's a great history lesson.
Yep, thanks. And so I'm not a teacher. So the Secret Service was created, and then it sort of meshed into being what it is now. But they are still financial crooks. Anyway, you'll hear from someone else about that. So they didn't find anything. They searched the apartment. They didn't find anything. So the three main Secret Service agents were like, well, everyone's gone. Let's just look again. Maybe we missed something. So they started to back all over again. And so one of them started to flip through page by page the white pages, which is like a phone book of everybody in the city. I had to explain what a white pages was. I don't know. There might be young people listening who don't know what the white pages are. You think that's possible?
Maybe. I've never called them white pages. So.
Well, then there's the yellow pages.
Yeah, yellow pages. So I know yellow pages.
The white pages are the residential.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes.
So then you have that. No, see, wow, god damn. I'm old.
We haven't even reached my birth year in your story, so I love to point that out every time.
Fuck you. Okay, so he starts going page by page in the yellow pages, and then he finds this little piece of black paper just in the moving and storage section, and they were like, this is something. Let's go to this storage place. And they go to the first storage place, and the woman was like, I was wondering when you guys were going to show up. And they're like, excuse me? Like, I called the police because this guy left his lights on. I went to turn them off, and I saw a bunch of police looking things like lights for like the siren. Yeah. Siren light. The siren's the sound. But the lights. Yeah. And then but everything was made, like you could tell that it wasn't new stuff. Like it was shoddily put together, but it was all handmade. Handcuffs and IDs, and she could see enough to go, I need to call the police. This isn't right. Yeah. And they just went blah, 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 and they just ignored her, and nothing ever happened. Shocking. And so they show up, and she's like, yeah, y'all are going to want to go in there. And so
I love this woman already.
So they get a search warrant. They go in there, and they immediately find what they would call like the kill kit or the rape kit. There was lots of string, lots of tape, things like that. But they were also finding photographs of women who were being raped or killed, very graphic pictures. And it was really hard. It was really hard to tell if those pictures were like, then the non-professional photos, the ones that obviously were taken by him, it was hard to tell if those were willing or unwilling participants, because they didn't necessarily, like there wasn't any of them fighting back. They were just sort of like in bed in these positions. And so it could have been consensual, and they just weren't sure, but that's also not part of their purview. There was lots of KY jelly, whips, shoelaces, chains, and then audio tapes of rape and torture. A lot of like, Lord, say this, I want you to say that. Tell me what that's like. Tell me what that's like. So although Secret Service agents went to the FBI so they could start the investigation, they couldn't. The FBI couldn't. there was no evidence that somebody was actually hurt. They are just looking at this mountain of evidence and they're like, or pictures or sounds or whatever, not evidence, but somebody got hurt.
Yeah.
Y'all, you know, it wasn't like, here's a crime, now go investigate it. It's like, there must be a crime, go investigate it. But they can't do that. So they needed some solid evidence. So they went to Roy Hazelwood and his team at the FBI. And so here's Agent Jane Vizeris. And she was 34 at the time of this case, but she was like the head. She was the boss of the two main Secret Service agents. So she was the head honcho in charge. And this comes from Cruel Deception, which is a documentary. You can get it for free on Tubi. You can watch it, TUBI. And so this is they've just opened the locker and they've gotten 144 pounds of, I guess, evidence. Before a crime, after a
You
crime.
say 144 pounds?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, baby. Okay.
We had literally a mountain full of material. We had 30, 40 road maps, and some of them would have an X marked somewhere on the map, almost like a treasure map. We had women's clothing, women's underwear. We had women's little trinkets of jewelry. We had the police equipment. We had multiple license plates from various states that obviously had been stolen.
Agents also recovered a number of women's driver's licenses and nearly 100 pairs of women's underwear. Some of them new, some looked worn. The Secret Service was organized to combat counterfeiting. They were not equipped to investigate the type of evidence they were finding.
The Secret Service, as part of the Treasury Department, for the most part, our criminal investigations are financial investigations.
Secret Service agent Jane Vizeris contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
They indicated that you really don't have anything at this point. I mean, you don't have any evidence. I mean, if you came to us and said, you know, here, this was used in a homicide, well, maybe, or a kidnap case, you know, maybe they could do something with it. But we really did, we just had our suspicion, and we had this mountain of material.
Because the Secret Service could not specifically identify any victims, the FBI could not pursue the case. The Secret Service knew if they didn't investigate this case, no one else could.
It was extremely unusual and awkward because typically you have a crime and you solve the crime. Here, we believed we were looking at a lot of evidence, but we had no clue what the crime was, or where the crime occurred, or when the crime occurred. But we all had very strong convictions that certainly crimes had occurred.
Believe me.
Thank goodness
For real? I mean,
for those Secret Service agents,
I get
because
so tired of the no body, no crime stuff. It's just ridiculous.
well, it's not even that. They're like, obviously this guy's up to no good. We just
Yeah.
don't know what the crime is. Like
Yeah.
they knew that this guy was no good and he wasn't talking. He wasn't giving up anything. But they were afraid that the higher ups in Secret Service were going to deny them the ability to investigate. And so they're like, you know what? We're just going to play this tape. And the tape they were going to play was a tape that was labeled Becky. It was just labeled Becky. And it was the rape and torture of somebody. There were several tapes and they were like that. So you could only play like 1 or 2 minutes of it before someone's like, that's enough. But take whatever you need. You know,
Yeah.
like, have the money, whatever you need. Just you find this guy, get the goods on him so that it can go to the FBI. Like you need to get evidence. And so take what you need, because
Yeah.
nobody else was doing it. And that is the sad part. Nobody else. Okay, so FBI profilers speculated that in the photographs where his face was seen along with the victims, he murdered the woman and disposed of her body, whereas in photographs where he was hiding his face, he allowed the victim to live. Why do they know that? Wow. I don't know. Maybe they figured out how many of them were alive or how many of them were dead.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's weird. So most of the 40 different women shown in his photograph collection have never been identified. 40.
That's sad.
DeBardeleben recorded torturing one victim as he pressed a burning cigar against her back, stating, like, this made me think of the six finger man in The Princess Bride. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
And he had that torture chamber underneath or whatever. And he was like, how does it feel? This is for posterity, right? He wanted the, like, how do you feel? Interesting. But he would say, describe the pain. How does it hurt? Just exactly how does it hurt? I want you to tell me that you're fascinated by the pain.
Oh my God.
The cruelty was the point. The victim being tortured was ultimately identified as 20-year-old Lori Jensen. And there will be a picture of her I'll send to you. But she knew that she was in trouble. But she ended up living. So, and being a crucial part of the reason why he's in jail. DeBardeleben represented himself in court because of fucking course. He thinks he's the smartest human being. And then during cross-examination, honestly, I can't believe the judge let him do this, but I understand, emotionally, I don't get it, but intellectually I do, because if he had stopped him from being able to do this, then he could have come back on appeal. Yeah. That he was being treated unfairly. And the judge was like, I'm not going to have that fucking happen. So, he, during cross-examination, he made one of the victims sit through the audio recording of her abuse. Some of them didn't handle it. Some of them did okay. So, but he also accidentally implicated himself when one of them was like, and I saw from the light on the door what he looked like, and I'll never forget him, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, but wasn't that light on the door really small and didn't emit much light and it didn't stay on? And she was like, I don't know. They were like, oh, you just described your car. Like you just described your car. She didn't describe the car. Yeah. So she was just like, there was a light on the door. And he was like, but it wasn't really low on the door, and it was kind of not bright and blah, blah, blah. And so the lawyers, the prosecuting lawyers are just like, whoop. It just let him do it. So he was found guilty on several offenses and given a cumulative sentence of 375 years in federal prison. Good. To be served consecutively. So he would never be eligible for parole until 2090 or something like that. Like, no one's living that long. Yeah. No one's going to live that long. And then he'd have to serve another sentence from another state and after that. And then so he's not immortal. So in personality, DeBardeleben displayed marked schizoid and narcissistic traits, shocker, along with symptoms of psychopathy. He also exemplified all 8 of the now outdated DSM-R3R criteria for sadistic personality disorder. And the DSM stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
It's a lot of big words
It's
there.
a lot of big words. Basically, if you're a psychiatrist, you have this book. DeBardeleben was characterized as having a Jekyll and Hyde personality. His demeanor could shift from affable to extremely cruel. And he's actually cited as an example as a both sexual sadism and antisocial personality disorder. So they use him as the example. Isn't this amazing that we never heard of him?
I've never even heard his name once at all.
So the precise number of DeBardeleben's victims will never be known. He was steadfastly never going to admit his guilt. He did not boast about his crimes. He didn't talk a lot of shit about what he did. But when he was in jail, he was like, oh, I'm big with the mafia. But then they were like, oh, we found out about all the weird sex shit that you did, and we don't want anything to do with you. So he just kind of stayed in his prison cell. But for a while, he thought he was like hot shit. But no. They're like, you're weird. According to the Secret Service, however, he likely had been abusing women for 18 years before his apprehension. He often approached his victims while pretending to be a police officer, which is also against the law. And they would later call the police to say, oh, this is what happened. So they knew he wasn't a cop. Eventually, they figured that out. He would regularly rape his victims in a sadistic manner. He was said to have a very small penis. And so
Love that detail that was thrown in for no reason.
Just tiny penis. And he would force the women to fellate him until he orgasmed, but he didn't always orgasm. So it was a lot of hard work to get him to orgasm. And it was one after another. I mean, the man was in his 30s and 40s, and he was still trying to have 16 a day or something. He was just really crazy about it. But he would rape them anally, which for someone with a small penis, I don't know how that worked. And then he couldn't always keep it up, and that was the whole thing. But then he would make them call him daddy. And that would help him come.
What a strange little man.
Strange little man. Oh, and the porn that he had, though, was homosexual porn, which if you talk to, which he's dead now, but if you talk to Roy Hazelwood, it was he would say the porn that somebody buys and watches and keeps and is interested in is that's the sexuality that they are.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So if you're looking at it in that respect, he would say that, and there's a really great deep dive in the book by Michel that the way that he committed his crimes was all a real obviously a fuck you to his mom. A lot of them looked like his mom, which is even weirder.
Oh, that is weird.
And then some of the other writings and things, the planning was a real homoerotic, needing his daddy's love and affection kind of a thing. So it all rolled in together. Here's a man that was probably gay, hated women, needed his dad's love and affection and never got it. There's just all of these things. It's so bizarre.
I'm just surprised he didn't kill any of his wives. I just would have assumed that he would have. So that's
he used them to kidnap and then abuse, but eventually ransom. So I don't remember what it's called, but he paid attention to the vice president of a bank. And then the vice president of a bank goes into work. And while he's at work, he kidnaps the wife. Well, he doesn't kidnap the wife. He shows up at the wife's house and is like, hi, I'm a Secret Service agent. and I'm here about financial crimes, booty, 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 booty. And then all of a sudden she's in handcuffs and is being beaten. And,
Yeah.
you know, he's recording her saying, honey, give them the money. And then instructions were given by the wives. And this happened more than once. And then the husband would get the bank money, get like the $60,000. No bank ever had $60,000, so like 30 or 40,000.
Yeah.
And then they would follow the instructions on where to put the money. And then his wife would go and pick it up, and they would be off with $30,000, $40,000. And then that would fund some of his weird business dealings. So like he started a business that was kind of like, it was kind of like glamour shots. Do you know glamour shots, Nora?
No.
So it was in the 80s where
Big mall.
it was in the mall, and women would go in and they get their hair done and they get on this like cool outfit. I have a picture of my mom that she did it. And then they would just pose for the camera and they would just look glamorous. Glamour shots. So his idea that he thought was going to be $1 million idea, multi-million-dollar, was to have that, but for porn. And then you would get to come in and rent the cameras.
This is like a glamour shot.
Yep. My mom has that almost exact photo. And he thought that people would want to come in and do their own porn shots and do like
just come to him to make their homemade porn?
No, not like video, but like come and take your photos with one of my models doing whatever crazy shit you want them to do. Okay. Or bring in your own model, but you have a spot to take that crazy ass photo.
Oh, all right.
He thought that was a grand idea. And one of his bank heists was for that. He was out of business. Anyway, obviously that did not take. Okay, so here are some of his victims that we, I guess, not 100%. He was not convicted on all of these, but this is some of the things. So 52-year-old realtor Edna Terry McDonald left her office on June 5th, 1971. She was going to Barrington, Rhode Island for an evening meeting with a Mr. Peter Morgan when she did not come home. A search was launched. She was discovered dead and hanging from a basement rafter the following day in the house she had been showing. There was no indication of robbery or rape as a motive. Instead, she had been strangled with her own stockings. Until a comparable crime was connected to DeBardeleben years later, police had no leads at all. DeBardeleben was charged but not tried for this crime. Lucy Alexander, a 19-year-old nursing student, was kidnapped by DeBardeleben from Georgetown, Delaware in March of 1978. He subjected her to multiple acts of rape and sodomy, made her perform fellatio on him, and then released her in a remote location the following day. 31-year-old realtor Elizabeth Mason agreed to show a man numerous residences in Fayetteville, North Carolina on April 2nd.
I lived there.
Oh, I know. 1979. Being a realtor, I would argue, is one of the most dangerous jobs for women.
It comes up in a lot of our stories for missing people, murdered women.
Because you meet people on the weekends, at night, if it's in the country.
In empty places.
I would always take someone. Oh, man. Thank y'all, realtors. We love you. He took out a gun, started pistol whipping Mason inside one of the homes they had been touring. She had read an article by Carol Burnett. Do you know Carol Burnett?
No.
Oh, she's a comedian, very famous American comedian. She's old now. She's funny. But she goes, I remember there was this man following me, and it was in an article. She was on the streets of New York, and a man started to follow her. And so she just turned around and started acting like Carol Burnett, just crazy. And she's funny. And so she's just started acting crazy. And the guy got scared and left her alone. Well, Elizabeth Mason was like, I'm going to do the same thing. And so that's what came to her mind. So she started fighting back. And the guy's like, dude, you're acting crazy. So he pistol whipped her in the head, and he pointed the gun at her. Click, nothing. Click, nothing. And she's standing there going, oh, well, I better fucking fight back again. So she starts fighting back. Crazy. He hits her again. Click, nothing. Click. The man was probably like beside himself.
Yeah.
The only thing that they think might have happened is that when he hit her on the head, he either engaged the safety or dislodged the cartridge.
Yeah.
So, fuck. So she's just like, I am not going to die today. Right?
Good for her.
So she's like scratching at him. She's yelling. She is like crazy. Yeah. So finally, he smashed her skull against the floor. He was like, I just want your purse. I just want your purse. And she's like, it's in the car. Go get it. Everything's in there. Just go. And he's like, I got to tie you up. Then I'll leave. I just got to tie you up. And then that's when he smashed her head into the floor. He strangled her, and he was like, just pass out, bitch, just pass out. And she finally did. And she doesn't know how long she was out, but she remembers 3 beings with her, like one right here and then 2 other ones behind her.
Yeah.
And she was just like, hey. And she sees, they're like, hey. And then she's like looking around. She was like, can I go back? And they're like, it doesn't work that way. And she was like, well, can you ask again? I don't think it's my time.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, you can go back. And then she woke up.
Imagine how crazy of an experience that would be.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
So then she's like, I don't even know how I got out of the house. Her hands were behind her back. Her stockings were down like around her knees. She's bleeding everywhere. And there was a man who was like, here, let me help you into your car. Let me help you into your car? Like, you're not going to take me to the fucking hospital?
Yeah.
What? But that man who helped her get into her car did not call the police until there was a reward out for that. Ugh, fucking people. That man I just don't like that man. Anyway. Blue, blue, bloop, blue, bloop, blue, bloop. On January 6th, 1979, 20-year-old Lori Jensen, who I mentioned earlier, was returning home late one night after working at a convenience shop in Ocean City, Maryland. A car was flashing light drew up next to her, and he identified himself as a police officer. And, it was all like, yeah, I'm a cop. And then I don't see anything, like you don't see it. She's like, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. So cause she was walking. He requested that she get into the car. She's 20. She's a little bit naive. She didn't know. He was dressed kind of like a police officer. I mean, he was like older at this point. Like, I don't know. So she was like unexpectedly handcuffed, and she was taken to a house 2 hours away while wearing a blindfold. She was subjected to rape and violence for 3 days while also being locked in a closet. She constantly noticed that the kidnapper was naked except for a rudimentary hood with eye openings. He took pictures of her and recorded her torture, forcing her to tell him how much she enjoyed it. After 3 days, he drove her back and released her alive. So she was like, I really enjoy this. She said she was like she had no emotion in her voice. She heard her tape and she's like, you could just tell that there was just no emotion. She was like a zombie. She was not even in her body anymore. Later, DeBardeleben pulled over 25-year-old Diane Overton, a lone driver, on January 11th, 1980 at 4 a.m. This makes me not want to drive alone at night. I will tell you that. While posing as a police officer on a quiet residential road. Like, I keep thinking to myself, would I stop?
Well, you know, you don't legally have to. You slow down, you put your blinkers on, and you're allowed to call 911 and verify the person that is the person that you think is you say, hey, I think I'm being pulled over. I don't know if this is a real cop. You are allowed to call 911 and verify before you, like, they suggest you pull in a very crowded area.
You just saved a life. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. Like,
I'm sure of it.
Like they say, if possible, pull over in a very, very crowded area and, you know, roll down your window just enough to say, hey, I'm calling 911 to verify.
Fuck.
If you're not in a crowded area, they say drive slowly, turn your blinkers on, and dial 911 immediately. Yeah. They say if you're ever suspicious, like they cannot arrest you for verifying that the person pulling you over is a police officer.
You just saved a life. I'm sure of it. So Overton hit his hand when he tried to rape her. Bit his hand, when he tried to rape her and yelled for help. She kicked the gear stick of his car as he attempted to force her into his vehicle, stopping the engine. DeBardeleben jumped into the driver's seat and repeatedly tried to run her over before eventually giving up. On December 11th, 1980, DeBardeleben entered a clothing store and approached 27-year-old Maria Santini, the cashier, brandishing a revolver. She had to hunch over in the footwell of his car as he drove her to his house after carrying her outside. He hogtied her there, photographed her, and raped her. Santini was then taken to a wilderness region and released. 37-year-old Jean McFall, Jean McFall, this is a really important story, a prominent realtor from Bossier City, Louisiana, vanished on April 27th, 1982 after accompanying a Dr. Zach to view a property. This was like, I want a $100,000 house. There's like, you know, I want it to be in the country. And so she was like, oh, $100,000 house, you know, that's a big payday. So she was found hanging from a rafter in the attic. They did not look there the first day, but they found her the second day. She had not been raped, but she had been stabbed twice in the chest and strangled. A neighbor had seen Dr. Zach arrive at the residence and provided police with enough information to create a composite sketch closely resembling DeBardeleben. A list of aliases DeBardeleben planned to use for his illegal activities, including the moniker Dr. Zach, was found in his private diary entries. The man wrote like a machine. So much. He wrote so many things down. DeBardeleben was charged but not tried for this crime.
Wow.
Which is a huge blow to the family, because the thing was that a lot of prosecutors were like, he has a 375 years in jail. Why are we going to spend taxpayer money? But then from the family side, it's
there's closure, accountability. You want to see, like, Louisiana had the death penalty.
Yeah. You know, like, that's for the family. They wanted to see him die. 17-year-old Kelly Marie Brownlee, when Brownlee moved out of her family's house due to issues with her abusive stepfather in 1982, she was lodging with her boyfriend and his family in their apartment in Michigan. And on May 20th, 1982, Kelly and her boyfriend took a bus to their high school, but Kelly skipped classes and subsequently hitchhiked to the 12 Oaks Mall in Novi, Michigan, where she made multiple job applications. A friend's mother spotted her at the mall and offered to drive her home, but Kelly turned down the offer. She was last seen at this location, and DeBardeleben has been accused of being involved in her disappearance. DeBardeleben reportedly preferred hitchhikers and brunette women, both of which matched Kelly's description. Brownlee's mother was provided with photos belonging to Bardeleben to help identify Kelly, but she was unsuccessful. Since then, he had been ruled out as a suspect because there was no photographic evidence. 42-year-olds Joe Rapini and David Starr returned home from work on April 13th, 1983 at a local Columbia Savings Bank in Greece, New York. They discovered a masked burglar holding them at gunpoint. He kidnapped Rapini and demanded that Starr visit a bank for a $70,000 ransom. Starr proposed the first half of the ransom and was instructed to leave it next to a burned-out building. The ransom was later collected by a woman driving a white automobile, which suggested that DeBardeleben may have accomplices help him commit some of his crimes, his wives. Even though Starr did everything to follow his orders, Rapini was found shot to death in his car later that day. Despite disparities in DeBardeleben's normal modus operandi, he was linked to this case by his own journal entries.
I'm amazed at how many murderers and stuff keep like very detailed records of what they're doing.
Hubris, my friend. Okay, so good news. 375 years in jail.
Yay.
Bad news. He was never put on trial for the murders, and so he was clearly a suspect for. Like, the only suspect.
Yeah.
He was never put on trial for any of those. Back to some good news. He stayed in jail. Lost all of his appeals because
yeah,
he was the one doing them. And then on January 26th,
sorry.
He was like, witch hunt. And then on January 26, 2011, DeBardeleben died of pneumonia at the Federal Medical Center in North Carolina. He was 71.
Yay.
And another kind of weird twist. This is a fucking twist. This was the epilogue of his book, and I was like, this is crazy. Okay, so cool news to round it out. His daughters all found each other and are friends now.
Oh, that's good.
The one that was given up for adoption, Dr. Teresa Keeney, a pediatrician, had a wonderful life with a loving family.
So all of the daughters turned out okay, though, right?
Eventually.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yes, eventually. Yeah. In high school, Dr. Keeney's best friend happened to be her older sister, Bethine. But they didn't know they were sisters.
How weird is that?
They didn't know they were sisters.
Oh my gosh, how did they figure it out?
Well, okay. So in high school, her best friend just happened to be Bethine, her older sister, but neither of them knew it. Bethine did not have a wonderful life. Her mom was not well, and at times was very hard on her. But she was a singer. She was a really good singer. She was doing well in school and had a great friend in Teresa. And it wasn't until many years later that Teresa got the courage to find her birth parents. So they took her she went into a room to look at her own file, and it says, like, this is who your sibling is. Bethine, whatever Charlotte's last name was. Bethine Jones, I guess. And she was like, what? She just about died. That was her friend. That was her, like, long lost friend, right? They ate lunch together every day.
That is such a cool story. Not that it happened that way, but that they...
Yeah. So her adoptive mom, though, didn't want her to connect with that family. She was like, you don't know what they're going to be about. You don't know the history. You know, she also had very, what's the word? Realistic, I guess. Like, you're not given up for adoption if things are good. Right? Like, you know that things are probably like either like it's not good when you're given up for adoption. You know, they can't take care of you, you're given away, you know, so like that they're giving you grace by letting someone else adopt you. So she had realistic expectations. So it wasn't until after her adoptive mom died that she actually went to the next step and connected with her biological mom. And she already knew the sister, and she didn't know how to get in touch with the mom, but she remembered that her friend went to her grandmother's house all the time. That was like another caregiver. So she connected with the grandmother, and then she connected everybody together. And it took her a while she lied about her name, and it took her a while. She just kind of wanted to hear some information, and to connect with them. They tried to tell her, don't go looking for your dad. Don't connect with him. He was not a good man. You're better off not knowing about. They sort of were protecting her, like, just leave that alone. You know, like, stay here. But man, the curiosity must have been killing her. Their youngest sibling, and then eventually she did tell her sister who she was. They talked on the phone. She goes, "Have you figured it out yet?" And she said, "No." And she was like, "Well, you used to know me as Teresa so-and-so." And then she was like, "What? My friend?" You know, that was hi. And so like that was just really exciting for them. So the youngest sibling, Lindsay, also had a really hard life. So she was Faye's daughter, and she looked like her mom and her dad, the only one of the three. And when she was a young kid, she was really manipulative. She was very smart and could be mean and manipulative. And her mom would say, "Oh my God, you are Mike DeBardeleben right now." And she would say that to her. And it got to a point where her mom would say, "Okay, Mike. Okay, if that's what you need, Mike. Okay." Like, wouldn't even call her Lindsay. Like, "Okay, Mike."
Wow.
So she had a really contentious life with her mom. But at 42, it like evened out, I guess, after the teenage years. And her mom eventually died at 42 of pneumonia. And that was a real shock to her. Like, she went to the hospital. They're like, "She's fine." They sent her home. She died a day later. Like, nah. That was just like, she wasn't really prepared for that. So that was really hard on her. She was still in high school at this point. It was her senior year, just before her senior year. So she just self-medicated her way through the last year of high school, drinking and smoking pot. She eventually became a Christian, a really conservative, evangelical Christian, and turned her life around. But then she realized after many, many years that she found a letter from her dad to her mom. And there was a little letter to Lindsay, and she remembers her mom saying, "This is a letter from your dad, but don't believe a word of it. None of it's true. Don't believe a word of it." And then he, it's like, "I love you. You're my daughter. I'd love to know more about you." So she reached out to him, because how confusing is that?
Yeah.
You're told your whole life your dad didn't want you. And then you see this letter that says, "I want to get to know you." And then he was so excited by her letter. And then that really confused her. So she decided, she talked on the phone. She said his laugh really bothered her. That was like the first sort of red flag for her, that his laugh seemed sadistic. And she was like, how is that possible? Like, that's confusing. You're like, You really want this relationship with your dad, but there's something about the way this man laughs that I really don't like. But she put that aside. So after many, many letters, many phone calls, she decided to go visit him and regretted it almost immediately. She walked in and he looked terrible. But he was so she said she never felt so close to evil.
Wow.
Right away. She dead eyes. His affect was cold and just void. Like she was just like, and for somebody who's like a evangelical Christian, who's very much like her faith is her, it was really hard on her. So she went home she went to where she was staying that first night and was like, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. And she felt like drawn to go back and see him because of her faith. She thought she could save him. And after the third visit, she said, that's it, I'm done. And she never she just cut him out completely from then on. So when she met her sisters, she was like, please don't go visit him. Please don't. You'll get nothing out of it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
So she was really trying, especially Dr. Keeney, she really was like, don't do it. Please don't, So like, I think that was probably the only sister that was really like, I kind of want to,
Yeah.
So they are in each other's lives. They think it's a little late to be sisters, but they are friends and they are working through the craziness together. So, and that, my friends, is my story. I told you it was going to be a long one.
You said 27 minutes.
I did say 27 minutes. Only an hour off. So yeah, what do you have for us next week, Ashley?
That is a very excellent question. I'm glad you asked while I try to think of an answer. When I typed in glamour shots, just look at this real quick. That's what came up.
Oh, yes.
I don't know why that's the glamour shot image, but anyways, it will not be a disappearance. How about that? I will change it up. I actually heard a really good story on TikTok. I follow a lot of true crime people on TikTok.
Yes, you do.
And I heard a really good one, and so I'm probably going to do that. It's not a disappearance. I've been doing a lot of those lately.
That's okay. I do serial killers, but this one didn't get caught for that. This guy was just a counterfeiter. And then look what happened. That's the crazy part. Anyway, don't die before next week, I guess. Be good to one another. What else? Thanks for tuning in.
Like us, love us, share us, tell people about us.
We're in season 6, y'all.
Yes.
That makes me so crazy. That's so weird. Who'd have thunk it? Anyway, thank you for listening.
Please be safe.
Please be safe.
Trust your gut.
Yes. Oh my God. Trust your
See
gut.
something, say something.
Call 911 to make sure that if you're by yourself and that cop car or seeming cop car is behind you, that's going to save some lives right there. Thank you. Thank you for that, Ashley.
Yes.
Nora?
Thank you for this very exciting story.
We traumatized
She
her
is
life staying with you.
She's like texting her friends, save me. Let me come home.
I'll try to do a tamer story
Oh,
next week.
you know what? This is why people listen to us. So anyway, we'll see you next week. Thank you for helping us make it to six wonderful seasons. We are going to make this one just awesome, more awesome than before.
Yes.
So until next week, we will see you then. Be safe. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.